Hello everyone, my name is Laurel and welcome to the Scienteer tutorial. This video is to help y'all be able to navigate Scienteer a little bit easier and hopefully clear up some of the hiccups that sometimes we have with Scienteer. Scienteer is kind of like that quirky cousin that you love them so much, but sometimes you're like, why? Why do you have to be so weird? Why? So that's kind of Scienteer sometimes. It's super convenient because we don't have to have anything on paper. We don't have to worry about getting things physically signed or worry about the inefficiencies of trying to take stacks of paper all over the place and get them to the right people. So in that way, it's really convenient. On the other hand, it can also be a bit frustrating sometimes because it has a few quirks, but hopefully this video will help clear up some of those quirks. The purpose of Scienteer is it's our registration system that not only we use, but it's used all the way through all levels of science fair, through our region, state, international. We are able to pass along the approval forms through this website, and it makes everything a whole lot easier as students advance to other fairs. The purpose of approval forms is making sure that students are engaging in research that is meaningful, but most importantly, that is safe. So making sure that students are staying safe, that any test subjects that are involved are being kept safe, that the testing that's being done is being done in an ethical way that minimizes all the risks that might occur in that project. And that's what these forms allow us to ensure. These forms that they fill out through Scienteer will be sent to our review board, who will look through those forms and may send them back asking for revisions, or they might approve the first round. That's the goal, approval the first round. The goal obviously is to get as many students approved in the first round as possible, and then ultimately have 100% of our students with their projects up to par so that they can be sure that they are approved to begin their research. What you're seeing right here is my teacher dashboard. So all of you should have received an email from Scienteer, or if you had a Scienteer account already, then you can just log in using the same information as before. And you will have your own teacher dashboard. And you will have over here, whenever your students are done with their part, it will send to you so you can double check everything. And so I already have one student who is ready for me to review them, but all the other ones are nowhere close. Over here, you'll see, in this green section, you'll see the ones that have already been reviewed and approved by you. And then here you'll see your students, projects, and their statuses. You'll also see on here the registration link for the fair. This one is for Yes Prep High School. There's also a separate one for if they are a middle school student, which is the same except it says Yes Prep Middle School. All of the instructions that you can find are actually located on the Yes Prep Science Fair website, which I will try to open up right now. So if you go to yesprepsciencefair.org, then you will see here we have our homepage. You can go to Teacher Resources. I'll move this up. And if you see at the first link, you can get to our Science Fair Scope and Sequence. And here you can find all of the resources. If you scroll a bit, you'll get to how to sign up for Scienteer one-pager teacher edition and student edition. If we go to the student edition link, this is a page that you could pass out to your students. We are changing this due date to November 2nd for first round, and then a couple weeks later in November for the second round, and I'll send that off to y'all as well. But you'll see the links here. Scienteer.com/register/YesPrep High School, Scienteer.com/register/YesPrep Middle School for middle school students. So these are the links that your students will use to register for the first time. If they already have a Scienteer account, if they participated last year, then they will just use their same login as last year. And in order to complete their account information, there's going to be a notification for them to click where they will enter their parents' information once again so that their parents can sign off on the forms. But for everybody else, if they don't have a registration yet, then you will go to this link. So let's say I am high schooler. I can go to that link. Oops, I actually have to log out in order to see what a student sees. Sorry about that. If I go here. So this is what they will see. So they are going to be a student, so they'll click student. And then they'll fill out their basic information, date of birth, and also their parent information. So this is an important key point. If the parents have an email address, this whole process is a lot easier. So if there's any way that you can help the parents get an email address, that would be really helpful. There's also an option that I will show you in case they do not have an email address, but this is just something that can make your life easier because then all they have to do is fill out the forms online. You don't have to worry about scanning in any forms. So they would fill in the email address of their parents here, as well as the parent and guardian last name, first name, and phone. Then they get to their information and their email. It is crucial that they have an email. Please help them get an email if they do not have one already, because they will need an email in order to sign up for Scienteer. So after that, they get to school. So you would select your name from here. So if I were selecting me, so the teacher's name, and then their grade level and their class period and project start date, which for right now, it really doesn't matter what they put here. It could be November 10th is what I've told my students to put, but they can ultimately change that later. And then they would click register at the bottom. Now let's say that your students' parents do not actually have an email. So you won't have to do all of that. It's just because I have many roles. So if you get to your teacher dashboard again and you go to your students, you can register a new student right here, register a new student. And you can manually do this yourself. What you will have to do is you will have to get you'll have to go to this link here for forms, and then there's also a Spanish version of the form here. And so it downloads the forms for you. You would print off these forms, and there's 3 forms in total that they would need to sign. They would need to sign this parental agreement form, the media release statement form, and then also the approval form 1B. Those are the forms that they would need to sign. And once they've done those forms, then what I do is I tell my students, hey, sit down at my computer, enter in all of this information for yourself, put in your username, your email address, your recovery questions, all of those things. And while they're doing that, I use an app on my phone called Tiny Scanner. And I use that, takes a picture, but it converts it to a format that looks like it's scanned, and it converts it to a PDF for you. And so I scan the documents into my Tiny Scanner app, and then I email them to myself. And by the time I'm done doing that, usually students are done with filling in all this information. And then you just choose file here to upload the agreement that you emailed to yourself. You say whether the parent agreed or declined. You sign off for the parent. You say that they agree to the terms of use and that you as the teacher or sponsor have filled out this information form and signed on behalf of the parent. And then your student will be able to log in using the information that they filled in on this form. If students had their parents do this on an email, then what will happen after the parents have signed on the email forms is your student will receive an email to the email that they provided on the registration form, indicating that they need to click a link and use a temporary password in order to log in for the first time, and then they will be prompted to create their own new password, and they'll be logged into Scienteer. And from then on out, all they need to do is go to scienteer.com, and then they'll get to the sign-in page, and they'll be able to sign in. So after a student has gotten their registration done, and this you need to get done this week because it can be honestly one of the biggest hurdles is that students need to get their parents to sign that form. If at all possible, you can have them call their parents or text their parents in that moment. That's even better. But that's one of the first biggest hurdles is just getting their parents to sign the forms and just reminding students to tell their parents. After they've done that, then they're ready to go on to the next steps of actually filling out the rest of these Scienteer approval forms. So something kind of cool from your teacher dashboard that you can do is you can go to students, and you can actually log in as a student. And I actually highly recommend you making your own fake student account. So I've made this fake student account, Laura Bingman, my long lost sister, Laura Bingman. And so I can actually log in as her. For right now, I'm going to show you that so that you can see that as a teacher, you can log in as your student, which is super helpful in case they just made a minor mistake on a date, or maybe they forgot to put the school address or something really small like that. You can just go in yourself and fix it yourself really fast, really easy. You can see where they're at. It shows you how complete they are in their account setup here, and it tells you what step they're on with their project. So you can really keep good tabs on them and hold them accountable, and you can also help them out if they need help. So one of the quirks is that if I'm zoomed out enough, you'll see that I have more of this information over here, and I can just log in as student right here. However, if you're zoomed in like this, so basically a normal screen, you actually have to click this little green plus button. And after you click that, then it will show you the rest of the information and you'll be able to log in as student. It's one of those quirky things about Scienteer, but now you know. So I'm logged in as student now. Obviously, the first thing to do is to have your students just log in as themselves. I'm just showing you this in case you ever need to log in as the student and just for ease of use for right now. So I'm currently logged in as my long lost sister, Laura Bingman, and you can see that I have my account status 100% complete because I got my parents to sign the forms. Great job. So now I need to actually begin project completion. This section right here, this project completion section, is what you will be using for the most of the remaining time that your students are filling out these forms. And this little blue button here, this is what they will most often need to click in order to move on to the next step. Some steps are just clicking this button, and that's all they have to do, either because their project is so simple it doesn't need additional forms, or because some of the things have already been decided for them, like who they're going to send their forms to get reviewed. That's something that's the same for all students. So sometimes all they have to do is click this button. So when in doubt, click this blue button under project completion. So after I've clicked that button, the first step is title and category. So I have put on this document that I gave to y'all. I have put on here some suggestions for title and some guidelines for categories. So for title, I know lots of students love to come up with creative titles, and that's awesome. Let them be creative. And especially with your high schoolers, it's really important that they also add a descriptive title that sounds more scientific as a subtitle. So the example that I gave was Sharks Are Friends, the effect of images on people's perception of sharks. So Sharks Are Friends was that creative title. The effect of images, the independent variable, on people's perception of sharks, the dependent variable, is that more scientific version of the title. So I highly recommend you do that. This is the first thing judges are seeing. It can make a significant first impression for better or worse. So making sure that we are both creative and scientific at the same time is really important. Then the categories for our fair, we have physical sciences, life sciences, and social sciences. These are the categories for now. They are subject to change potentially. If we need to add subcategories, we might, just depending on the number of students, especially if there's one category that seems to have significantly more projects in it than another category. We might end up splitting those into two just out of fairness. Life sciences, for instance, just looking at my students, I can already perhaps see the possibility of splitting that into environmental versus health. I think that that could potentially happen. If it does, I'll let you know. For right now, just have your students pick between physical, life, and social. Physical is going to be the physics, chemistry, engineering, math, things of that nature. Life sciences is going to be your biology, environmental science, biochemistry, health, things of that nature. And social sciences will be your psychology, social science, behavioral, basically anything that they're doing that involves people will most likely fall into the social sciences category. So that's the first step. So if I go back to my Scienteer, I'm just going to put creative title, effect of independent variable on dependent variable. And I'm going to pick that I am high school physical sciences. Let's go with that. Okay. So then I submit. And you see after you've submitted a step, it'll say success. And it'll say what you've just completed. Great. And it'll bring you back to the dashboard. This is from the student's perspective. This is their dashboard. So then you can see project completion's gone from 0 to 11%. Yay, that's exciting. In order to move on to the next step, I have to click this next button. It doesn't automatically move me to the next step. I have to click this button. So I click the blue button. And now I have a team. So in this case, I'm going to say it's not a team project, but let's say that it was. If you see here, you have all of your students here as possible team members. So these are all the registered students. That means that if their team member has not registered yet in Scienteer, they won't be able to add them as a teammate yet. So make sure that both members of a team are registered on Scienteer in time so that then they can add each other to their team. If this is not a team project, then you'll just click this is not a team project and you'll hit submit. For the team projects, once they've invited each other, they will then get an invitation in their notifications on Scienteer, and they'll need to accept that invitation in order to merge their forms so that they're not both filling out forms separately, but rather they're filling it out together as one team. Another helpful thing is that Scienteer has these helpful hints on the side. So definitely if you're feeling lost at any time, first place to look would be the Scienteer helper. Second place would be perhaps this video. And third might be any of the guides that I've posted for you. So submit. And success. Project is an individual project. Great. Something else cool that you can see is you can see the steps over on the side. You can see now I've gotten to step 3. If at any point I wanted to return to a prior step, I could click on that step and I could adjust it and then just hit submit and it'll save any changes. Your project has been updated. Great. Move on to step 3. Also a very quick and easy step. It's just the start date. So as I said before, this is something that is subject to change and will most likely change because you don't know when your project's getting approved yet. I'm just going to put November 10th for now and submit. Success, start date has been set, close. Now going on to step 4. This is the survey questions. This is the TurboTax portion of our Scienteer journey. This is really amazing because it makes it to where you do not need to memorize your forms that you need. Scienteer will tell you what forms you need based on what your project includes or what your students' projects include. So this is really helpful actually, but it's only helpful if you fill it out correctly. So make sure that you are working with your students and helping them to select the options that truly match their project so that they're getting the correct forms that they need. There's definitely a possibility that students' projects might change later, or that you might end up needing a form that you didn't get here. It is possible that the review board will say you need to fill out this additional form, and they'll send you an additional form, and then your student will fill that out. I urge you to be as accurate as possible on here though, and maybe even as overly cautious as possible on here, just because once you've done these survey questions and you've started filling out those forms, if you redo the survey questions, you're going to have to redo those forms. even the ones that were done correctly, which is frustrating. So making sure that you fill out these forms correctly is really, really important. And of course, if you have any questions along the way, you've got Scienteer helpers over here, and you've also got me if you have any questions, as well as the ISEF website, which has lots of information about rules. So here I'm going to just go ahead and make my project as difficult as possible so I can show y'all. So you can see, after clicking those, I've got a risk assessment form 3 that popped up. That means that's gonna be an extra form that's required of me. Great. Something else that's quirky about this, don't click clear and start from beginning, even though it's on the right, and it seems like that would be the logical place to put where you put next. They put theirs on the left, so just being aware of that, making your students aware of that as well. So this next part is about people. So I'm going to be having people taking surveys. Whoa, look at that. I've got 2 more forms that popped up over here. Human participants and sample informed consent. So those are going to be more forms that I'm going to need to fill out. Next section. Okay, let's see. I've got vertebrate animals in this. Woohoo! Let's see. Live vertebrate animals. Yes. Oh, look at that. Looks like I've got a few more forms over here that I need to fill out. Vertebrate animal, qualified scientist, regulated research institution. Exciting. Oh man, did I break it? Don't die, Scienteer. There we go. Then here, this is probably one of the forms that your students will be doing. I know bacteria is definitely something lots of kids like to do. So it involves growing bacteria and cannot be done at home. Then that would be something that would be a potentially hazardous biological agents form and would require a qualified scientist form as well. So I'm just making mine the most complicated it could possibly be. Oh man, and I'll base this on a continuation. Then it should have popped up. There we go. Continuation research progression projects form. Okay, and I'm going to complete my survey. Woohoo! So now I've completed the survey questions. I'm going to move on to my research plan. If you have been following the research plan that I had uploaded before, which you can get from our scope and sequence calendar, if you go to the research plan template here, or another way is your students have student resources page. And if they were to scroll to writing your research plan, they've got access to the research plan template document. They've also got access to 3 examples, and you have access to these as well. You just go to the student resources section. 3 examples, one from social science, one from life science, and one from engineering. Let's take a look at the engineering one. As long as you have been following this research plan document that I uploaded for you, all you're going to have to do for this research plan piece is copy and paste into the sections because it's completely aligned. So this is the rationale, hypothesis or engineering goal. I'm going to copy and paste that. And I highly recommend that you do actually have your students fill out these forms on a Google Doc or some other separate document. Why? Scienteer has been known to crash on people, and it's very sad when it crashes and you don't have it saved anywhere else. So make sure that you are having your students, even for the other forms, that you're having them actually fill that out. Got my procedure. That you have them fill that out on a different page. Safety for right now, I'm skipping. That was something that I wanted them to think about in terms of how they're going to be safe, because that's going to come into play with the additional forms. Data analysis, which this does not, you're not going to get denied merely for not having a very detailed data analysis page. Really, if they just wanted to say that they're going to make a bar graph or a line graph or a pie graph and that's it, that's all that they really need for right now. Any additional statistical tests, if they already have an idea of what they're going to do, that's great. If not, don't sweat over it. The safety portions are way more important. So make sure to spend more of your time on those. The next part of the research plan is research plan attachment. This is perfect for cases where, for instance, you're doing a human subjects project or your students are, and they need a survey or they're giving a survey to their participants, especially if it's something that is potentially triggering or deals with something like depression or suicide or something like that could potentially present a possible ethical or emotional issue for a student that's participating in this. It's really important that you provide that attachment so that our review board can view the exact questions that will be asked so that we can ascertain the level of risk that really is at play here and determine whether or not you should change some of those questions in order to ensure the safety of your participants. This could also be really great in case you want to attach a potential prototype diagram or something of that nature, or if you want to attach where you found the safety precautions that you're taking so that we can see, oh, they said that they're going to be taking this safety precaution. Where did they get that information from? You can attach that here as well if you feel like it's especially important for explaining how you're keeping yourself safe during this project. So if you don't have a research plan attachment, that's also okay. You can just hit save and finish. Success, your research plan is complete. Yay! Now, on to extra forms. This is the part that can be a little bit more challenging because it's really going to look different for every single student depending on what their project has. And if you're feeling like you want to have an idea of what this is before your students get started on it, or if you want on that meeting where you're getting them to register, their parents haven't signed it yet, and you want them to have an idea of what kinds of forms they're going to need to fill out, and they're not able to see it from there yet, you can just Google ISEF Forms Wizard. There we go. Rules Wizard here. And this will take you through a lot of the same steps as the Scienteer survey so that then they can answer those questions and get an idea of what forms they'll need to fill out. And then if you wanted to know what the forms looked like, the ISEF forms are on here. And so you can download them yourself and you can see, okay, it said I need this form. What does a risk assessment form look like? You can click on it and you can see the types of questions that are going to be asked by Scienteer. So for instance, for the risk assessment form, it would be asking all of these questions, which really center around safety. So these additional forms are really about if you're using potentially devices or biological agents like bacteria or viruses or tissues, or if you're using vertebrate animals or you're using people, what are the safety precautions that you're taking on behalf of yourself and the vertebrate animals, humans that are involved in your study? That's really what these project forms are getting at with these additional forms. So just always having in mind at your center, it's about safety. That's going to be what the key point of this is. So first, the risk assessment form. This is something that's going to be the case for any project that involves any of those things that I just said. There's going to be some kind of risk assessment. So you're going to have to talk about the hazards. You're going to have to talk about how you're disposing of things. I highly recommend looking at the MSDS, sources of safety information. You can put the MSDS there. You can say the labels on the product. Going to Carolina Biological and looking at the algae culture form. What are the precautions there? What does it say in terms of disposal? Things of that nature. Human participants form. Who's going to be participating? They want to make sure that you're not targeting vulnerable populations, or that if you are, then you're doing something to accommodate for the additional risk that's involved for those particular participants. Purpose of your study, to be able to evaluate the meaningfulness of what's being done, and that the benefits are worth any costs that are involved. What will the participants need to do? How long will it take? And here's a copy of any surveys. You can also put, so you could attach it to your research plan, or you could attach it here for those survey copies. I would even recommend just attaching it in both places just to cover your bases. Potential risks to the human participants. How are you going to minimize the risk? What are the benefits for the people that are participating? What about privacy? Data storage. How are you going to make sure that you maintain the anonymity, there we go, of your participants? Data disposal. What are you going to do with the information from your participants afterwards? How are you going to get consent? I'll tell you right now, just make sure, say written consent across the board, written consent. Vertebrate animal form. I highly recommend you encourage your students to avoid vertebrate animals at all costs, because there's so many additional steps you have to go through. And if anything happens to that vertebrate animal at any point in the study, that includes like a fish, right? Fish are prone to dying spontaneously. If anything happens to them, you have to stop your study immediately. You have to stop your study. So I highly recommend that you just encourage your students to use a model organism that is an invertebrate. Have them use mealworms, or have them use larvae, or have them use Daphnia, or maybe you'll use fruit flies. You know, there's lots of different animals that they could use that are not going to require all of this additional information, all of these additional approvals. There's not any risk of you getting in trouble or getting disqualified later if one of them dies. So just making sure that you try to encourage them if at all possible. Oh no. I'm just gonna, let's see. Oh no, I didn't anticipate that. I'm just gonna put that. Okay. No. I did a PDF. I'm sorry, y'all. I shouldn't have made. So here, you'll see it's going to delete all signatures if you do that, which is sad. But I'm just going to make none of the apply just so I can get through this with y'all faster. Sorry about that. I didn't realize the vertebrate animal forms needed that, which is another reason to encourage your students to not do invertebrate animals, because they need all kinds of special forms and approvals. That's just really frustrating. So in any case, so yeah, you can tell if you have to redo all of that, then you have to kind of start over. But luckily it kept the research plan information there, which is really great. But all of the extra forms I would have had to redo. Awesome. So let's say that, so now I'm in a circumstance where I don't really need any extra forms. If that's the case for your student, then all they had to do was click on that. And now they're moving on to the bibliography. Your students must have at least 5 sources. That is a requirement for everybody, 5 sources, at least 5. And I recommend that they be in APA format, although it's not absolutely necessary. It's still helpful to teach them how to put things in APA format, especially since if they put any of this on their board or in their notebooks, or in their notebooks, then they're going to want it to be in APA format. And then for the sake of expediency, I'm just gonna do this and submit. It will not let you move on until you have 5 things in each of those, 1 thing in each of 5 boxes. Okay, great. Research locations. So this is where you would put the location where the student's going to be actually completing their projects. I made a couple PowerPoints to help your students, to help you and your students go through these processes so you can see that I walk you through each of these. I have one slide that says Step 8, Research Locations. If you were to click on this checklist, it's really helpful for understanding what the SRC is going to look through. They get this checklist, and it can help you if you're stuck on, does this require prior approval? Does this require a different place, a different location? So potentially hazardous biological agents have biosafety levels. If it's a BSL level 1, that means for most high school classrooms, as long as you have a fume hood and eye wash, then you'll be good for BSL level 1. If it's BSL level 2, that means that it's going to require a regulated research institution, which is just harder, but not impossible. So I'm just gonna, and they can select the type, say home, submit. External signatures. So if they needed a qualified scientist to sign off, if they're doing something potentially dangerous, they might have a qualified scientist form that they need to get filled out. That qualified scientist must be someone that has experience in that field. If that's you, great. If it's not you, then they need to find someone else. Maybe it's a different teacher, maybe it's a professor at a university, but they need to have somebody that can sign that. For this project, if it was nothing complicated, nothing hazardous, then they don't need any kind of scientist or supervisor signatures. There's also a designated supervisor signature. The designated supervisor can be you, and that does not require special training in the area. That can be you just saying that you're going to watch and make sure that they're staying safe. So certain projects just require a designated supervisor. Others require a qualified scientist and a designated supervisor. And those two can be the same person. But it's just important that the qualified scientist one is someone that actually does have experience in that, so they can go through the research plan and make sure that it's 100% safe. Project approval method. Everyone just clicks on that blue button, and that's all you have to do, because everyone's going through the same SRC and everything like that. And as it turns out, this project, since it was so simple, and I said none of those things applied to my project, it did not require SRC pre-approval in order to get started. But it does still require teacher approval. So clicking here, they need to click there, and that sends it to you. So let's say I return to my account. So remember, I've been technically logged into my account and logging in as them through my account this whole time, and I've actually gotten through all of the forms. So if you ever are in here and you need to go back to your account, you do click here to return to your account. And I've gotten here, I'm going to choose my teacher role. For most of you, your teacher role is your only role, so you don't have to worry about that. And then you come over here, and I've got some that require a review. So this was my fake one from my long-lost sister, Laura Bingman. So I do review project, and then I can look through all of their forms. I can look through their research plan. I can look through any additional forms if they had any other forms. I can select forms for review here, and you can see the different forms. And they're not going to have an abstract done yet, but they will need to do that by the end. And so you can click on any of these and look at the form, and it'll show up here. So you can view that form. Once you've looked through it, which hopefully you've been checking in on them this whole time, but in case you didn't get a chance to see their final edits, you can use this as a chance for that. You can either send it back for revision, right? And you can flag different things that they need so they know what it is that they need to change. Or you can approve the project. And let's say I do approve project. Great. Now it's been approved, so that student is ready to go, ready to start their project. If they needed to have those other approvals, then it will say that they're waiting for SRC or IRB approval. And once our review board approves their project, they will get a notification of approval and they'll be able to begin their experimentation. If you have any questions at all about that part, feel free to reach out to me. This is pretty much all the steps that your students have to go through. Obviously, I'm anticipating there will be questions along the way, and that's perfectly fine. But just if you ever are feeling stuck, you can come back to this video and see how I went through the different steps. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video so that you could learn a little bit more about Scienteer. And I hope that you find it a little bit easier now. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and bye.